بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وآله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So today we're going to start off with Mukhtasar Minhāj al-qāṣidīn, which is a book the by a Hanbali scholar, Ibn Qudāmah. Now, one thing that I think is necessary to start off with when we hear the word Ibn Qudāmah, especially the students of knowledge, um, the first thing that's going to happen is their mind is going to go to Sahib al-Mughni. So al-Mughni is a famous book in the Hanbali fiqh, and it is written by Muwaffaquddin ibn Qudama, right? And usually when we say the word Ibn Qudama, that's what we understand from it. We understand the author Muwaffaquddin. But the reality of the matter is that the book that we're looking at, Mukhtasar Minhāj al-qāṣidīn, is not Muwaffaquddin's, actually his brother Abu Umar ibn Qudama. So Mukhtasar Minhāj al-qāṣidīn, I think the first clarification that needs to be made, belongs to the brother of Muwaffaquddin, that is Ibn Umar, right? And now these scholars were the time of the Crusade Wars. So their father, originally from Nablus, a city in Palestine, when the Crusaders attacked Palestine and they were gaining ground, they're actually of control of Palestine at that time. And their father was a famous sheikh over there, and he used to do a dars in the masjid. Once the French ruler realized that what he was doing, and he had a lot of influence on the local people, he started to pursue him, right? To capture him, probably to kill him. And so from there, they made hijrah and they migrated to Damascus in Syria. Here, both his sons were born. Muwaffaquddin became one of the great Hanbali fuqaha. And then you have Abu Umar, who was also one of the Quzat. He was a judge in Damascus, and he also synthesized and summarized this book, right? So Mukhtasar Minhāj al-qāṣidīn is a work from a series of works, actually, right? Living and living up to the scholarly tradition of that time, he basically didn't author his own book because the understanding of knowledge in the ilm in Islam is basically that it's a continuance, right? It started off from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba, Tabi'in, those who followed them, and so it's connected through a chain. So rather than bringing radical ideas and innovative ideas, which is kind of like the hallmark of academia these days, these scholars tended to focus on the texts and works of those before them, right? It's not like there was no innovation. It's not like there were not any creative ideas. There were. But the fact is, they didn't happen in a vacuum, or they didn't happen to present something completely theirs. They would rather work and build on what was previously done. And so this text actually holds the same value, for this is a synthesis of Minhaj al-Qāṣidīn, which in itself is a synthesis of Imam Ghazali's famous book, Ihya Ulumuddin, right? A little bit on Ihya. So Ihya Ulumuddin is one of the last books of Imam Ghazali. So initially he was a very prolific scholar, an expert in theology, in usul al-fiqh, and a lot of their subjects, right? He was very famous, and he's one of those people who actually delved deep into Greek philosophy and the onslaught of corrupted thoughts and the onslaught of Greek ideas which were manifesting in the Muslim population and destroying their aqaid. Imam Ghazali was on the top tiers of those ulama that went into the field, absorbed the Greek philosophy as a whole, and then presented a critique of it. So these were his youth, the time of his youth. So Ghazali, very prolific, very hard at work in this philosophical debate field. But then once he realized that, I'm spending my entire life in doing things which might not benefit me in the hereafter, in the akhirah. And so he proceeds. He cuts off his uh, ta'aleem, the teaching that he was doing in the Nizami madrasa, and he leaves everyone behind to go in seclusion, like the Prophet of Islam did in Ghar Hira, right? When he went and cut off from everyone. Same thing Imam Ghali did. And at that time, he actually thought a lot about it and came up with this book. So the book, the title, Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of the Islamic sciences, right? In which he basically points that the ulama of his zaman, of his time, were involved in the ancillary subjects or the non-important subjects, and all their efforts were going into that. And so he presented Ihya Ulumuddin as a sort of a da'wah of sorts, a revival of sorts, to bring that the real ilm of deen is how you connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how you connect with His brought Sharia, right? Not about the small furu' of fiqh, small minute details of masail which most of us will never encounter in our lives, debates against foreign thought and ideas, which a lot of us will not be very affected by, especially in this time, because the readership and the influence that Western thought has had on us because of colonialism, etc., that was something that still wasn't there in al-Ghazali's time. So it was very limited, the Greek influence. So he was thinking about that these things aren't really going to be of benefit, and yet much of our time is being spent here. And so he came up and brought Ihya Ulumuddin, which is, depending on your publisher can range from 3 to 7 volumes, right? Right. The problem is Imam Ghazali, although a prolific scholar in theology and the rational sciences, was it's said that he was not very well versed in the traditional sciences, as if in the hadith, for example, or in the ulum al-Quran. That's not where his expertise lied, right? And the other thing is that being a social person all his life, when he completely cut off ties with everyone and then went away in seclusion, obviously this is going to have negative impact on a person's psyche, on their soul, right? Imam Ghazali is a human like all of us. So this really had an effect on him, and that made him write a few things in his book which kind of seem counterintuitive to what a human should be like, and sometimes outright conflicting with the established authentic hadith that we have. And so this book, Ihya Ulum, became very famous. Even within the time of Ghazali, it became very famous. And because it was something new, it criticized a lot of the scholarly community at that time. People were not happy. And that's usually what happens when someone comes with a change in idea, like a revolution of kinds. Most people aren't very accepting of that, in their times at least. Afterwards, it becomes famous and they become like holy saints and everything happens. So same is happening with Ghazali. A lot of people not really liking his work. Some are doing it. He actually wrote a small rebuttal on the different accusations that were being made against him. But his authorship, his book had a few problems. And so Ibn Jawzi, rahimahullah ta'ala, another famous scholar, the author of Talbis al-Iblis, he also was one of the criticizers of Ihya al-Ulumuddin. But he wasn't one of those people who criticized for the sake of criticism. Rather, he understood the value of the book and he understood the influence of the book. So rather than just criticizing it, he took the book and actually worked on it. He said that this book is beneficial, of course, but it can be improved. And so he did the thing that he said, that Imam Ghazali, he mentioned in his book a lot of hadith which are not authentic, some outright fabricated. It's not that Imam Ghazali himself did this, rather because he was an expert in the field. What he found as hadith, he just copied it in his book and transmitted it. So in that regards, he's excused because he didn't do it purposefully, but it is still a problem. And Zaif and Mawzu hadith, fabricate hadith, are not something that a person should consider very seriously. And so what he did is removed all of those fabricated hadith and also those anecdotes that Imam Ghazali mentions about the extreme versions that some Sufia and some people engaged in the spiritual sciences went to, right? Which went against the core of Islam and the code of Sharia. He actually removed those things as well, right? So he reduced everything that he thought was wrong with the book and kept everything that he thought was good. And he named it Minhaj al-Qāṣidīn, as we'll see in the Muqaddimah coming soon. Now, one thing that Imam Ghazali did and Ibn Jawzi didn't find it necessary to do or remove was the mention of the Masail of fiqh. So Imam Ghazali filled his Ihya with a lot of Masail of fiqh. And Ibn al-Jawzi, he went on to keep it, right? And then came Ibn Qudāmah, and he thought that these Masail are already known to people through the books of fiqh. And they're not even the main objective and purpose of the book, Ihya al-Ulum. So what he did, he removed those Masail as well. So Masail of fiqh. He says that if you want them, you can go to the books of fiqh and get them over there, right? We don't need them over here. And so he went on to even redact it further. So if this is Ihya, this would be Minhaj al-Qāṣidīn, and then Ibn Qudāmah comes and removes all the Masail, and this would be Mukhtasar Minhāj al-Qāṣidīn. So that's like the genealogy of the book. Imam Ghazali was Shafi'i, Ibn al-Jawzi was Hanbali, and so was Ibn Qudāmah. So you can see how this work that we have is like the fruit and production of Shafi'i and Hanbali scholars, and both from the 12th and the 13th century, right? So a lot of work has been done into this book. Now, as we go through the Muqaddimah, we'll realize what's the purpose of this book, how it came to be, and some of the things that we've mentioned. So our work here is, there is a translation of Mukhtasar Minhāj al-Qāṣidīn out there on the internet. But it's called Towards the Hereafter, right? It's been translated, and its English title is Towards the Hereafter, right? It is published by, I think it was Dar al-Ihsan. I'm sorry, it was published by Dar al-Manara and translated by Wail Shihab, right? So Dar al-Manara, it's located in Misr. That's where it was translated and published. But we've redone the translation, and the reason why is that uh, I think the translator's first language was not English, and so a lot of phrases are like literal word translations of the Arabic text, and other times the translation feels a bit stiff, right? You're most welcome to consult that translation as well, of course. But we redoing the translation. Most of the translation is being assisted by AI. It does a better and faster job. Can give you variations of translation. I personally am verifying the translation to see that it fits, that it's being translated correctly, and whatever changes needed to be made are being made. And the translation is based on the edited version of the book by some scholars in the Arab world. You have Shu'ayb bin Abdul Qadir al-Arnaout. They put further ta'liqat, yani footnotes on the original book. And Ustaz Muhammad Ahmad Dahman, he literally presented introduction of the book as well. And this version of it is printed by Maktab al-Dar al-Bayan in Damashq. So that's the Arabic text if you want to look at the Arabic text, which is going to be the basis of our translation, inshallah. Right? So let's start with the book. Right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Remember, this is the these first few lines in the first paragraph, that is. This has basically been added after the death of Ibn Qudāmah, the author himself, or the synthesizer. And this is usually the case you'll find in Islamic tradition, that when the Ustad passes away, their students, they remember their Ustad with a lot of alqab and titles, and then starts the book. So in essence, uh, this is not part of the book. The actual book starts from here, right? So the esteemed Shaykh, the Imam, the scholar, the ascetic, the worshipper, the unique, the erudite Najmuddin Abu Abbas Ahmad, son of the esteemed Shaykh, Imam, scholar, the active, the worshipper, the erudite Izzuddin Abdullah Muhammad, son of the esteemed Shaykh, Imam, the scholar, the active, the worshipper, the erudite, the Shaykh al-Islam, till the end. May Allah be pleased with him. So he says, praise be to God whose mercy encompasses all servants and who has favored the people of his obedience by guiding them to the path of righteousness. He has endowed them with his grace for righteous deeds, so they attain the achievement of their goal. And this is the first thing. He starts off the introduction telling us that whatever goals that we might have, we must invoke Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this path of what we're about to go on, because without Allah's grace, the righteous deeds that we and the purification of the heart that we hope to achieve cannot happen unless He blesses us with it. I praise Him with the praise of one who acknowledges His abundant giving, and I seek refuge in Him from the punishment of expulsion and banishment. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah alone. There is no partner to Him, and this is a testimony that I store for the day of resurrection. I bear witness that Muhammad is His servant and messenger, clarifier of the path of guidance and integrity, suppressor of the deniers and atheists among people of deviation and stubbornness. May Allah Almighty bless him and his generous and noble family with a prayer that conveys to him the ultimate hope and desire. So after Hamd and Salah, and this is a way that people that in Islamic scholarship we author this way, based on a few hadith, that is that كل أمر لم يبدأ بحمد الله أو كل أمر لم يبدأ ببسم الله فهو أبطر. Anything that does not start with Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, and in some cases with the Durud, then it is maqtur al-barakah. It's removed, all barakah is removed from it. So that's why you'll see that in our authorship, we'll always find in the Islamic world that you start off with Hamd, Salah, Salah, Bismillah, and then you start with the personal book, the actual writing. So to proceed, I once came across the book Minhāj al-qāṣidīn by the esteemed Shaykh, the Imam, the unique scholar, Jamaluddin ibn al-Jawzi. May Allah Almighty have mercy on him. I found it to be amongst the most significant and beneficial books, with abundant benefits. It gained my interest, and I desired to acquire and study it. So this is the initial reading that he did. He found it rather beneficial, right? And when you find something beneficial, you go back to it to see how much more you can benefit from it. When I examined it a second time, I found it exceeded my expectations, right? And this is a testament to how good that book was. Usually when a book is large, people don't really want to read it again, right? But he's reading it again, which means he found it very beneficial. But then he admits, but I also found it to be a lengthy book. Thus, I wish to extract this concise summary which encompasses most of its objectives and important benefits, except for the evident issues related to the ancillary branches mentioned at its beginning. He's talking about fiqh over here, the furu of fiqh, as they're well known in the books of jurisprudence, so widely available among people. And widely available among people because fiqh, for the longest time, and even still, is considered like one of the esteemed Islamic sciences, right? So spiritual sciences today as well are now considered as this same importance, sadly speaking. So because the works of fiqh are so readily available, there's no need to mention them, and I've removed them. Right? Since the objective of the book is other than that, it's not the fiqh, rather it is the purification of the heart, or you could say it's the fiqh al-qulub. Right? It's not the furu', rather it's what you do with your heart. I did not adhere to preserving its order or mentioning its wording verbatim. Rather, I conveyed some of it conceptually for the sake of brevity. I may have included a hadith or minor point from other sources if relevant, and Allah Almighty knows the best. So he clarifies that don't expect it to be exactly how Ihya Ulumuddin or exactly as Minhaj al-qāṣidīn have been set. There might be something, there might be ups and downs over here, some changes, some exclusions, some inclusions you might not find in the original, but that is for the sake of improving and benefiting the book. And Ibn Khaldun, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions the maqasid of authorship. Why do you author something? Why do you write something? Right? So one of the reasons why people write, or they should write at least, is to benefit people. Literature already available, rather than introducing new literature, is take old literature, make it understandable, make it digestible for the people of your time. That is also a very good uh, project that you could do if you want to write something, if you want to present something, right? So being an author by writing something new, it's not necessarily something that is good, right? So innovation is not always equal to benefit. That's the principle I want you to take away. Innovation is not always equal to benefit. Sometimes innovation can be good, sometimes it can be pointless, and sometimes actually be harmful. So as scholars, students, authors, our task should be to find that which is beneficial and then present it to our audiences, even if it's not something that we ourselves can take credit for. Perfectly fine. I ask Allah the Generous to benefit us and those who read, hear, or contemplate it. May He make it purely for His sake and conclude our deeds with goodness and guide us to what pleases Him in our words, deeds, and intentions. May He forgive our shortcomings and negligence and not leave us to our own devices, not even for the blink of an eye. And this actually is an indication towards hadith, nor to anyone among His creations, in which the Prophet Islam actually instructed us, and he actually himself used to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَا تَكِلْنَا إِلَىٰ أَنفُسِنَا طَرْفَةَ عَيْنٍ, that not leave us to our own selves even for a moment. He is sufficient for us, and He is the best of trustees. The compiler, i.e. the original synthesizer, Ibn al-Jawzi, rahimahullah ta'ala, said after concluding this introduction, after his hamd thana, now he is mentioning verbatim the introduction of Ibn al-Jawzi, which is the basis of his work. To proceed, O sincere aspirant, O esteemed seeker, I see you have prepared yourself to abandon the excessive distractions of this world and are determined to devote yourself to the hereafter. Knowing that mingling with creation leads to confusion and neglecting self-accountability is the root of negligence, right? Where does all negligence come from? When you're not holding yourself accountable. You know that if time is not seized, it will be overtaken by loss and the stages of birth hasten and the rider to the abode of death. You search for a companion among books to accompany you in your solitude and converse with you in your silence, and to learn from. Which book would you take? If you favor the book Ihya Ulumuddin and claim its uniqueness in its genre and its value in itself, very famous book at that time, then know that the book Ihya contains flaws that only scholars can recognize, right? Even though he wrote for like everybody, even the general population, but it's better to actually have someone trained in the sciences to lead you through these books as well. Because sometimes you might end up with information which is not factual or valid. You need someone who can validate it for you. Sometimes you might come up with something which is confusing, not very explicit, and you need someone who can explain it to you. So someone with training, someone with more experience, doesn't have to be like a certified scholar, someone who has stayed with the scholars, with the mashayikh, has learned from them. Even they classify as well. Right? But self-reading, although you can do that, it's better that you do it with a pencil in which you're marking everything you're not understanding and then asking whenever you have even modicum of doubt. Right? Being humble benefits all of us whenever we're reading something. So there are problems in this book only scholars are aware of. The least of these are the false and fabricated hadith attributed to the Prophet alayhi salam, while they're not actually a hadith or attributed to him. And then he gives the justification for Imam Ghazali. He narrated them as he found them, not that he fabricated them. So Ghazali being the kind of man he was, it's not expected from him, and certainly we're not going to imply or have su'uzan with such a person that he himself fabricated those hadiths. Rather, he found them not being an expert in the field, he just mentioned them. Right. So why is these types of ahadith problem? One should not adhere to fabricated hadith or be deceived by an invented statement, because you might end up doing something because of that hadith which goes against the Sharia. So when it comes to the matters of the Sharia, it comes to the matter of Islam, we're gonna make sure that what we're receiving is as authentic as we can. Okay. Now he gives an example. How can I be content for you to pray the prayers of days and nights, none of which contain a word said by the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So Salawatul Layli wa Nahar are basically some adhkar that Imam Ghazali mentions in Ihya. Ibn al-Jawzi says that none of these are mentioned in the hadith. So why would you waste your time reading adhkar which don't exist in the literature? Rather, your focus should be on that which is established from the Sunnah. How can I prefer that your ears be struck by the words of the Sufis, which the author of the Ihya compiled and encouraged to act upon, when they have no basis, no Islamic basis, such as the discussion of annihilation, subsistence, the command for severe hunger, setting out on journeys without being in need, entering the wilderness without provisions, and other matters, which I have exposed in my book entitled Talbis Iblis. So all these things that the Sufia do, which are against the Sharia, he's already mentioned them separately in Talbisul Iblis and how they confuse people. Some of these things Imam Ghazali himself uh, got engaged in for the reason I mentioned, because he was secluded from the people. Uh, it influenced his psyche a bit, and he might not have been in the best position to be commenting on these issues. Allahu Akbar. Khairan. I will write you a book. Now he's telling the readers what he's doing. I will write you a book free of its flaws, but not devoid of its benefits, like the flaws of Ihya and the benefits of Ihya. In it, I will rely on the soundest and most well-known traditions, narrations, and the most established and eloquent meanings. I will omit what is suitable to be omitted and add what is suitable to add. After mentioning why he's doing what he's doing, then he said after that, and if you're determined to isolate yourself to fulfill the right of the truth upon your soul and take hold of it, let knowledge be your guide. If you really want to tread the path of spiritual enlightenment and development, then knowledge should be your guide. أي علم القرآن والحديث والفقه, among other ulum, right? So don't be an ignorant person trying to do things, trying to gain spirituality you have no knowledge of. For example, this whole spiritual, not religious uh, thing that's happening in Western countries is where they are in seek of spiritual enlightenment, but they don't stick to a religion, right? This is the kind of thing that he's warning us about. That if you really want to take this guide of spirituality, you should have ilm of it, right? Not just anyone who's giving you the impression, oh, we're acquiring spirituality and you're going after them. Every exercise they tell you, you're doing that. Everything that they do, you're doing that in order to seek spirituality. He's warning against that. And let knowledge be your guide. Have the ilm to know, is this the right thing to do? Is this the way to actually tread this path? Or is it wrong? Right? So the basic ahkam of the Sharia are needed. And then obviously he's going to mention about those further on in the book as we go along. Seek out the subtle desires of your soul that you may be saved. Beware of the path of one of two men. Number one, a scholar who is known for debating jurisprudence and its content with his leadership or has attained judgeship. He's become a judge, a qazi, and strives to preserve his position, or has embellished his preaching and narrowed the eyes of his understanding. So he's totally fixated on the outer fiqh, kind of something that we see in some of the students of ilm as well. Some people, their focus is on like the outward appearance of the fiqh, prayers and jihad and stuff like that. Important, no doubt about that. But so much focus that you lose sight of other important things in front of you. That's what he's trying to say. And a scholar who is just into jurisprudence, debating people, trying to establish um, his presence in the field. That is one scholar that you need to be aware of. The second person that you need to be aware of is an ascetic who revolves in his corrupt opinion in his ignorance, seeking closeness by kissing hands, believing in blessings of people, acting according to whims without the Sharia of Allah and His Sunnah. And a person who is following paths of spirituality in complete ignorance of what actually Islam is teaching, or what actually are the paths laid down by Islam. That person also is a problematic person. So a scholar who does not take care of his spiritual development and a spiritual person who has no knowledge at all, these two are problematic people out there to get you in your deen. So who should you take as a guide in this path, or who should you be willing to listen? Are people who are trying to gather between the two. They have ilm, they're acquiring it as well, and they're also focusing on improving and becoming better humans and better Muslims. The two have deviated from the path of correctness, content with the superficial aspects of deeds rather than the pure essence. So you're out where you're praying your salah, but your mind is completely somewhere else, right? So it's not just that they're praying, they're also focused on what they're praying as well, right? So it's not just the aspects or the outer appearance of the deeds that they're engaged in, but they're also focused on the pure essence. These people are usually deviate from that path, right? And what they do is deceiving beginners with the glimmer of mirages. Those people who themselves are new to this journey or are ignorant themselves, they really don't know. Show them a kind of a miracle, a feat of human anatomy, and they're impressed like, wow, this sheikh has beyond imagination, right? For example, it's much established in Buddhist traditions that breath work can actually has major benefits, right? You can reduce your heart rate, increase your heart rate, reduce and increase your temperature, and stuff like that. You can just do it if you have control over your breath. So sometimes and it usually happens in more rural areas in which these kind of fake mashayikh and peers, they're there and they have some of these skills. They show it to people, ignorant people generally impressed. they become devoted fans, right? So with the glimmer of mirages, they're confusing these people, leading them astray, right? Their path is far from the way of righteous predecessors, the Aslaf, which was the path of integrity and safety, right? No fancy magic tricks, no confusing people, sticking straight to what exactly is being said in the Sharia, even if they're not liking it themselves. I will include in this book, Allah willing, accounts of the righteous predecessors that indicate their ways. So he's going to give, like Imam Ghazali did, anecdotes to explain the points that he's going to make. Our book is needed by both the advanced and the beginner. Whether you're new to spiritual journey, enlightenment, development, or you're an expert in the field, this is something that contains nourishment for all of us, as it contains the secrets of acts of worship and warnings against the harms of worldly interactions. Okay. So following Imam Ghazali, the compiler divided the book in 4 quarters. Imam Ghazali himself also divided the book in 4 parts. He called it a rubu quarter. So the first quarter talks about worship, right? It's called rubu al-ibadat. And each quarter has different books, you could say chapters, and within the chapters you had sub-chapters. So it starts off rubu al-ibadat with the book of knowledge and its virtues. And then you have sub-chapters like obligation to seek knowledge, knowledge of the heart, etiquettes of teaching and learning, the harms of knowledge, and the characteristics of good and righteous and evil scholars, etc. And this is what we're going to look at first. We're going to start off with the book of knowledge in the first quarter. Then you have the book of purification and prayer, talk about the virtues, the etiquettes of prayers, what's prohibited, voluntary, etc. Then there's book of zakat and its secrets, talking about the etiquettes and the subtle meaning of zakat. Then you have book of fasting and its secret, so everything about the secrets, etiquettes of fasting. And this is the second book that we're going to look at. After Kitabul Ilm, book of knowledge, we'll go directly to book of fasting because Ramadan is ahead of us, so we should be prepared for it, right? And then we'll go back to prayer and purification, and then zakah, and then hajj, and then we're going to complete rubul ibadah in the correct manner. You have book of hajj, you have book of etiquettes of reciting the Quran, book of remembrance and supplication. That these are the contents of the first quarter. The second quarter is the quarter of habits, rubul adat. So we have the book of etiquettes of eating and socializing, book of marriage and its etiquettes, book of earning a livelihood, book of halal and haram. He'll talk about all etiquettes, the meanings, why you should get married, how you should earn. So a whole guide to living, basically. The third quarter is the quarter of destructive matters, rubul muhlikat, sins and characteristics and qualities that will destroy a person, which will literally lead you to hellfire. So the first is the book of the heart's marble, and you have the book of self-discipline and moral refinement. Talk about good character, how to refine it. Then you have the book of breaking of the two desires, food and lust. Book of harms of the tongue, book of condemning anger, grudges, and envy, condemning the world, condemning greed and stinginess, condemning fame and showing off, condemning arrogance and self-admiration, book of repentance and its conditions. Talk about all of those different maladies and diseases of the heart and how you can actually improve. And lastly, we have Rubu' al-Munjiyat. Fourth quarter is that of salvation. What are those characteristics and what are the path that we need to take in order to be successful in purifying our hearts, attaining Allah's pleasure, and going to Jannah? So you have the book of fear and hope, book of poverty and asceticism, book of tawakkul, book of love, longing, intimacy, contentment, book of attention, sincerity, truthfulness, self-accountability, self-monitoring, book of tafakkur, reflection, the book of death, what comes after. Each of these 4 sections includes books, chapters, sub-chapters among the sections of the first quarter. That was the introduction, and now starting off the first quarter of the book, That is the core of acts of worship. Within it, the first subchapter is the book of knowledge, the virtues, and other related matters. So start off with the verse of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون. Say, are those who know equal to those who don't know? And the people of knowledge and those without knowledge, the ignorant. Are they same? Are they equal? This is the way of saying no. There is a difference between the two of them, right? And inshallah, we'll continue with the first quarter in the coming weeks. Thank you for joining us. And I think the first step in this journey is to constantly make dua, right? Make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open up the meanings of the book to you. Make dua to grant you, and all of us, everyone included, the tawfiq to act on what we learn. If it's do something, to abstain from something, that we start doing those things. Make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects us from shaitan and all of his minions and all of his tools. And make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept this amal of presenting and listening, teaching and learning for every one of us, and may it be a source of guidance and a source of salvation for you and me, for the author of the book, and the whole genealogy. Ibn Qudāmah, Ibn Jawzi, Imam Ghazali, all of them should be included in that journey, inshallah.